They laughed at my useless office job before I'd even sat down, not behind my back, right there at the conference table, loud enough that the intern by the window flinched. Someone joked that I was the guy who fixes Excel when real adults do the actual work. Another called me PowerPoint support, and the room laughed the kind of laugh people use when they're sure you won't matter in 10 minutes. If you've ever been the quiet one, the one people assume is harmless background noise, you'll understand exactly how that moment felt. And if you've ever been underestimated, you might want to hear how this ends. I'm telling this because I've kept my head down for years. Because some people think silence means insignificance. And because that day in that room, everyone was wrong about who I was. But I didn't correct them. Not yet. The meeting was held in our mid-size regional office. Glass walls, recycled air, the faint smell of burnt coffee that never leaves the carpet. Quarterly review, mandatory attendance for all managers, team leads, and a couple of directors. I wasn't supposed to be the center of anything, just Grant from finance, invited to provide numbers. That's what the VP called me when she opened the meeting. Okay, everyone, this is Grant from finance. He'll help us validate budgets. Not CFO, not by title, not even by department. Just Grant. The guy with spreadsheets. No one questioned it. Why would they? I don't dress loud. I don't talk unless it matters. I don't hang out at after-work drinks, laughing too loudly at jokes I won't remember. I'm the kind of man people glance at once and categorize for life. Before the meeting officially began, the side conversations started. A sales manager leaned toward another and said, "You think he even knows what a field report looks like?" The other snorted. He probably panics if someone moves a decimal. I didn't react. I opened my notebook, set my pen on the table, and listened. Not because I'm weak or shy, but because listening tells you more about people than confrontation ever does. When you speak, you reveal yourself. When they speak, they reveal themselves. And in that room, they revealed everything I needed to know. Across from me, a younger employee, Mia, from analytics, gave the two of them a quick, uncomfortable glance. She didn't say anything, but she definitely wasn't enjoying the jokes. I made a mental note of that. A couple of others stayed quiet, eyes on their laptops, pretending not to hear. Silence out of fear, not agreement. Another note. Then, of course, there was Derek. Tall, loud, expensive suit, but cheap attitude. One of those mid-level managers who treats every room like a stage and every colleague like an audience he deserves. He entered late, talking loudly on the phone about carrying this division on my back. He dropped into his chair, like gravity obeyed him out of respect. He barely looked at me before smirking. Oh, great, he said, loud enough for the entire left side of the room. Finance sent us one of the interns. A ripple of laughter. Even the director cracked a smile, the kind you give to someone who's annoying but too productive to challenge. I could have corrected him right there. I could have said the words they were going to hear eventually anyway, but I didn't. Not because I wanted revenge, but because timing is everything, and the meeting hadn't even started. The VP finally called everyone to order. Laptops snapped shut, chairs straightened, the room falling into that office-style forced stillness. I watched the faces around the table, bored ones, impatient ones, anxious ones. People who thought the next 2 hours would be just another routine review. I knew it wouldn't be, because a week earlier, corporate had sent out a memo, a short one buried between updates about compliance training and the new reimbursement app. Most people skimmed it. Some didn't open it at all. That's normal. Most memos aren't life-changing. Except this one was. I'd read it, obviously. I had written half of it. The announcement was clear. Effective immediately. Grant Carter has been appointed Chief Financial Officer of the Regional Division. My name, my title, my authority, spelled out in black and white. But judging by the room around me, hardly anyone had bothered to read it. And honestly, I didn't mind. Being underestimated isn't always a disadvantage. Sometimes it's the cleanest, quietest kind of power. especially in a room where arrogance talks louder than competence. The VP started presenting. Numbers, charts, forecasts. People nodded along, pretending to understand more than they did. Derek interrupted twice, bragged 3 times, and corrected the VP once, incorrectly. Meanwhile, I watched, not passive, observant, calculating, measuring. I knew that at some point in this meeting, we'd all have to introduce ourselves formally. Title, team, role. And when my turn came, everything in this room would shift. But I didn't rush it. I didn't crave a dramatic reveal. I wasn't there to humiliate anyone. I was there to see who they truly were before they knew who I truly was. The VP clicked to the next slide. Before we continue, she said, let's go around the room and introduce ourselves. My pen tapped once against the page. Finally. The introductions started clockwise, each person reciting their title with that familiar corporate rhythm. Quick, practiced, half bored. Senior sales manager, regional ops lead, HR business partner. Nothing surprising, nothing meaningful. Just labels people wore to feel bigger than they were. Derek introduced himself early, loudly of course. Derek Hollins, Senior Operations Manager. I run the only team in this building that actually makes money. A few people laughed. Not because the joke was funny, but because people like him expect laughter. His eyes slid to me afterward, waiting for a reaction. I didn't give him one. I sat still, pen resting against my notebook, posture calm enough to irritate him. He didn't like that. So, he said under his breath, just loud enough for me to hear, what are you going to say? Spreadsheet boy, level 3. I ignored him and focused on the others. Names, departments, faces. I memorized details easily. Who leaned forward when they spoke, who slouched, who watched the door like they were planning their escape. Then about halfway through the table, it happened. One of the marketing leads, the type who tries to be funny because she isn't confident in her ideas, looked at me and smirked. And this is what? Our data assistant? Or project support? I always forget which is which. Her tone was light, but the words weren't harmless. They were meant to put me under her. This time I did respond, just not the way she expected. You'll know in a moment, I said quietly. She blinked, not offended, confused. It was a small line delivered without sharpness, but it changed the air for a second. A micro stillness washed across the table. A few heads turned, not many, but enough. It wasn't the main blow, just a reminder that I wasn't asleep. The VP continued the circle. As people talked, Derek kept leaning back, spreading his arms over the chairs beside him like he owned the building. He interrupted others to clarify things no one asked him to clarify. He'd been campaigning for a promotion to director for months now, loudly, aggressively, and with a sense of entitlement that made even the patient folks in HR wince. From a financial standpoint, his department wasn't terrible, but it wasn't good either. Behind schedule on 2 audits, over budget on 3 projects, turnover twice the company average, multiple complaints about his communication style, all formally documented, all ignored because he hit numbers on good months and charmed the right people. That charm was fading now. Even he could feel it. He leaned toward me again as someone else introduced themselves. You know, man, he murmured, you don't have to be scared. Everyone botches their first big meeting. Just keep it short. No one's here for the nerd stuff. He grinned like he was doing me a favor. I didn't look at him. I didn't have to. Because while he saw me as a nobody, the VP, who absolutely knew my title, kept glancing at me with a kind of controlled neutrality. She hadn't reintroduced me properly because she assumed the memo had done the job. That was her mistake, and she'd realized it too late. But she didn't correct it. Not yet. She was waiting to see if I wanted the correction. I didn't. Something important shifted during those introductions. A small but deliberate part of me stopped being patient. Not angry, just done pretending. That was just the beginning. Because the moment we finished introductions, the VP handed out the printed agenda: financial review, project pipeline, performance metrics, classic quarterly structure, a normal meeting on paper. But on the table, the tension was growing. Derek grabbed his agenda, skimmed it, and scoffed. Budget updates? Ah! All right, spreadsheet boy, this is your big moment. Keep it simple so the adults can follow. The director frowned slightly at that. Quiet, restrained, but visible. Another note in my mental file. I could feel 3 things happening simultaneously. 1. People were getting bolder in their disrespect, because no one had challenged them yet. 2. A few were getting uncomfortable. Maya kept glancing at me like she expected me to either break or explode. 3. The room had no idea how close it was to shifting, not because I wanted revenge, but because I believed in accountability. The VP began distributing copies of the performance summary, metrics I had personally compiled, metrics that told a story people in this room had been avoiding. I watched reactions as the papers hit the table. A tightening jaw here, a raised eyebrow there, a nervous swallow from the marketing lead. They knew the numbers weren't good. They just didn't know I knew exactly why. Then Derek flipped to the second page. "Oh, come on," he groaned. "Who wrote this? It looks like something an intern slapped together." I turned my head toward him, slowly, deliberately, and met his eyes for the first time. "I wrote it," I said. He froze mid-breath, just a single beat, a fracture line in his confidence. Then he recovered, smirking again, louder. "Well, then we'll have to help you polish it. No shame, man. Some of us do the real work." A few people chuckled. A few didn't. The VP inhaled. The director shifted in his chair. Maya bit the inside of her cheek. "And me?" I closed my notebook. Not snapped it. Not slammed it. Just closed it. Quietly. The kind of quiet that means something is about to change. Because the next item on the agenda wasn't theirs. It was mine. And they had no idea. The VP cleared her throat, ready to continue the agenda, but I gently lifted a hand. "Before we move on," I said, "we should clarify roles. It'll make the numbers easier to understand." A simple sentence. Calm, neutral. But the room stilled like someone had hit pause on the HVAC. Derek rolled his eyes. "Oh boy, here we go. The finance assistant wants a turn." He leaned back, smirking, expecting applause. He didn't get any. Not this time. I stood, reached for the HDMI cable, and connected my laptop to the projector. The screen flashed, then settled on a clean title slide. Regional Financial Overview. Presented by G. Carter, nothing fancy. No dramatic sound cue. Just clarity. Maya straightened in her chair. The director sat forward. And Derek, for the first time that morning, stopped moving. "I'll keep this brief," I said. "I know everyone's busy." I clicked to the next slide, and then I watched the room change. Budgets, forecasts, variance charts, turnover analysis, audit findings. No surprises for me. I'd built this deck myself. But for them, seeing everything laid out at once, with no sugarcoating, hit like a controlled blast. Halfway through the second slide, Derek lifted a hand. Okay, slow down," he interrupted. "None of this is relevant until someone from leadership confirms." The director cut him off quietly. "He is leadership, Derek." A thin, clean silence snapped across the table. Someone's pen dropped. Someone exhaled too loudly. The VP stared at her agenda as if reconsidering every decision she'd made that morning. And Derek, he blinked rapidly, like dust had hit his eyes. "What?" he said, voice cracking just slightly. "He's... what?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile. I simply stated the truth. "I'm Grant Carter," I said, "Chief Financial Officer for the Regional Division." I assumed the memo made that clear, but given how many questions there are about my role today, apparently not. The faintest tremor passed through the room. Not fear, recognition. People finally understood the hierarchy, the budgets, the approvals, the performance assessments, the promotion requests. All of it went through me, I didn't know it yet, but that decision would cost them everything. I clicked to the next slide. Audit compliance. We're behind on 3 required corrective actions, I said. 2 belong to operations. A few heads swung toward Derek. He shifted in his seat. We also have repeated issues with late sign-offs on risk logs, I continued. In one case, a project exceeded its financial cap by 14% without justification. That wasn't, Derek began. It was your signature, I said. Page 6 of the report. He closed his mouth. Slowly. I didn't attack him. I presented facts. Numbers. Records. Paper trails he'd assumed no one cared about. But I cared. That was my job. Then came the turnover slide. In the last quarter, I said, operations saw a 22% turnover rate. That's more than double the company average. Someone winced. Another muttered, Jesus. We surveyed exit interviews, I added. The top reasons given were workload mismanagement and leadership communication. I clicked. A list of anonymized quotes filled the screen. My manager dismisses concerns. Yelling is normal. Team meetings feel hostile. Input isn't welcome. Every line a wound someone in this room had inflicted. My voice didn't change tone. I didn't add commentary. I didn't need to. The evidence did the talking. Derek's chair creaked as he leaned forward. This is completely out of context, he said, louder than necessary. People complain when they're stressed. That's not a reflection of leadership. And I turned to him calmly. Do you disagree with the numbers? He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I disagree with the interpretation. Then explain it, I said. I'm listening. His face went pink. In that moment, that tiny, sharp moment, he realized he couldn't bluff his way out. Not with numbers. Not with me. He tried anyway. It's not my fault if my team can't handle pressure. We work in operations. It's fast-paced. If someone can't take a firm tone is not the term employees used, I said quietly. A low ripple moved across the room. This was the micro-catharsis. Small, clean, controlled. Not revenge. Just truth. The director finally spoke. We've received multiple informal complaints, too, he said. This isn't new. Derek looked between us, betrayed by the very people he thought he'd charmed. You all knew about this, and you're acting like it's news to you? It's not news, I said, but today it becomes action. I clicked to the next slide. Next steps. Leadership review, pending promotion freeze, culture compliance training, a clear formal list. All standard corporate processes. Nothing dramatic. But for Derek, it might as well have been a guillotine. He pushed back from the table. You can't freeze my promotion. It's been frozen for 6 weeks, I said. Pending review. I assumed the memo about that was also skipped. A few people lowered their eyes, suddenly fascinated by the table surface. Chaos isn't loud. Chaos is realization, and it was happening in silence. I closed the slide deck. We'll continue with the agenda, I said, but I want to make one thing clear. Every eye lifted. Respect isn't optional in this organization, and neither is accountability. I'm not here to embarrass anyone. I'm here to fix what's broken. That includes numbers and culture. Then softer. This isn't about punishment. It's about standards. The VP nodded slowly. Thank you, Grant, she said. Let's take a 10-minute break. People rose quietly. Some avoided my gaze. Some gave small, apologetic nods. And Derek left the room fast, shoulders stiff, jaw locked. They thought the silence meant the storm was over. They were wrong. People like to imagine that the fallout happens loudly. Shouting matches, slammed doors, security escorting someone out. Real corporate fallout is quiet. It unfolds through calendar invites, follow-up emails, and HR forms with polite subject lines like next steps. Over the next several weeks, the noise faded from operations. Not because people suddenly became kinder, but because Derek wasn't the one setting the tone anymore. After the meeting, HR scheduled his leadership review, a standard documented process. And once they combined the audit issues, turnover rates, and complaint data, the outcome was inevitable. He kept his job, but he lost the promotion. And more importantly, he lost the assumption that he was untouchable. He became quieter, careful. When he walked down the hallway, the confidence was still there, but the swagger was gone. He greeted people he used to ignore. He held doors. He paused before speaking, not out of fear, out of awareness. A few months later, he was reassigned to a different region's support role, a lateral move on paper, a demotion in every meaningful way. He accepted it. He didn't have a choice. That was the consequence he earned. Documented, realistic, proportionate. But this story was never just about him, because the truth is, disrespect spreads, and so does its opposite. During the weeks after the meeting, I paid close attention to the people who had stayed silent, the ones who had laughed, and the ones who had tried, in their own small ways, to do the right thing. Maya, the young analyst who had looked uncomfortable every time the jokes flew, ended up on my radar for more than just her expression. Her work was good, clean, insightful, and she asked the kind of questions that people ask when they're paying attention to more than just their own tasks. I met with her one afternoon and offered her a temporary assignment, assisting with a cross-department project. Exposure she wouldn't have gotten for years otherwise. She didn't understand why at first. "I didn't do anything," she said. "You didn't join the crowd," I replied. "Sometimes that's harder." She looked at me for a long moment before nodding. She understood. Others benefited too. The quiet ones, the steady ones, the ones who treated people with decency long before they knew who I was. We built new standards together, nothing dramatic, nothing performative. Leadership training, clear meeting protocols, formal expectations for communication, anonymous surveys that actually meant something. Because for the first time, someone reviewed the results who wasn't invested in protecting the loudest voices. People adjusted. Morale improved. Turnover dipped. You don't fix a culture by punishing a villain. You fix it by rewarding the opposite. Still, not everyone was happy. There were whispers, of course, that I'd come in swinging, that I made an example of Derek, that corporate had sent a hatchet man. None of that was true. I never swung. I never needed a hatchet. All I did was stop pretending the disrespect was harmless. About 2 months after the meeting, I was reviewing quarterly budgets when someone knocked on my office door. I looked up. It was Derek. He hadn't spoken to me directly since the reassignment. He looked smaller, not broken, just stripped of the arrogance that used to hold his shoulders up. "Got a minute?" he asked. I gestured to the chair. He sat, hands clasped tightly, and stared at the floor for a moment before speaking. "I shouldn't have talked to you like that," he finally said. I thought you were someone else." "I know," I said, and I wasn't offended, just disappointed. He nodded slowly, breathing out through his nose. "I'm working on it," he said. "All of it. Leadership, communication. I'm trying." "I can see that," I said. "It matters." He stood to leave, then hesitated. "You're not what I expected," he admitted. "Most people aren't," I replied. He gave a faint, almost reluctant smile before walking out. A chapter quietly closed. A few days later, during an all-hands meeting, the VP reviewed the quarter's improvements: better performance alignment, stronger cross-team cooperation, hiring metrics trending up. It wasn't a celebration, but it was a beginning. After the meeting, as people filed out, I gathered my laptop. I looked around the room, the same conference table where they'd once laughed at the useless office guy. Only no one was laughing now, not out of fear, out of recognition. They finally understood what I'd known all along. Title doesn't give you authority. Behavior does. They thought I would fade back into the background once the dust settled. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. Because leadership isn't about volume or ego or dominance. It's about clarity, standards, quiet consistency. And that day, walking out of the conference room into the buzzing open office, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not triumph, not vengeance, just peace. The kind that comes when the world finally aligns with the truth you've been carrying alone. I didn't need applause. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need people to like me. I needed them to understand the value of the work I do and the dignity of the people around them. Now they did, and that was enough.